I am Ben Pick, and for the second time tonight, this is Writing to Write, where I give questionable writing advice through writing metaphors. And I went through this whole spiel a minute ago, until my wife told me that I hadn't yet gone live because it takes 2 clicks to start the live stream, because you gotta hit the go live button and then you gotta press OK. You do not press OK. Anyways, if you can't tell by the title, I was at Awesome Con this weekend. If you can't hear from my voice, I've gotten a little sick because of Awesome Con this weekend. That being said, it's just a little cold, so a little bit hazy upstairs. My voice is hoarse. I might, crack a little bit, but yeah, fun times. And also, Richard, thank you for mentioning that it is daylight savings time, because that was not a fun experience going from Saturday into Sunday, like a full day in which I could have used an extra hour of sleep. I did not get it. Now, looks like Andy was second, but I didn't see a first in there, so either it got cleared or something along those lines. But yes, we are now earlier for those of you in the UK. Hello, Eloise. Thank you for joining in. And Bethany, thank you for coming as well. And yeah, so like I mentioned, I already started this recording until my wife came down here and told me, hey, you didn't actually start the recording. So like I said, there's going to be mistakes. I don't have a full-on script, so I have just my loose notes, and we'll see how this goes. Cool Gamer, thank you for joining, and let's cut right to the chase. So, Awesome Con. It was this past weekend. In a nutshell, yes, it was awesome. I was on the vendor floor the entire time, more or less, in Author's Lane, which is a part of Artist's Alley. And all that is specially designed for self-publishers. And I have a nice little haul here, which I'll go through and probably do a future video in which I review everything, because right now all I know is what people told me about their books. And I haven't gotten a chance to read them yet, obviously, because it's only been a day. I know. I'm very disappointed in myself, but there are quite a few thousands of pages to go through because I did get a decent number of books. Anyways, how'd it go? It went okay. There was tough selling. I am not the most outgoing and outspoken person. If I see somebody walking by and I can tell that they aren't going to stop, I'm not going to interject myself into what they're doing and sort of force myself into that situation by shouting at them or, doing a couple of things. There were a couple of chances where I could. I saw somebody walking by with a Virginia Tech hat, and I could shout, "Go Hokies," and then he probably would just waved and walked on. But I'm not the type of person who would just randomly shout at a stranger, especially if they aren't interested. So I usually wait for somebody to at least come up to where my books were, and if not strike up a conversation, at least make eye contact. And that's when I could say, hey, how are you doing? How's the con going for you? See anything cool? That sort of thing. Because I try not to be too overbearing. Because I know, coming from the opposite side, when I'm intentionally walking in the middle of the lane to try not to be on one too close to either side of the booths, I don't really care, but I don't necessarily like it when somebody just yells at me like, hey, come check out my thing, buy for me. So I try to treat people with the same respect when I'm on the other side of the table. Now, what did I learn? That I need to get better at communicating. I am terrible at explaining myself. I'm terrible at enticing people to come read my books, to check things out. But overall, the general environment, I would say it was fun. I had some great nerdy chats with a handful of people, and there were writers who were going around just sort of introducing themselves to everyone else in Author's Lane, and I kind of did the same thing. I made my circuit, and you can, for the most part, writers who were there didn't necessarily buy people's books. There was one woman who was phenomenal, who went down the entire row, bought from my neighbor, bought from me, bought from the person next to me. But I think I didn't really track her, but I'm pretty sure she bought something from everybody in this entire row. So either she has a library or she's just very, very generous. And that was really cool because we were talking about writing, and then she bought a book. So that was like a nice little bonus to the conversation, which is pretty cool. Yes, I do have an elevator pitch ready. I have a couple of different elevator pitches ready. The shortest one that I go with is falling through is X-Men meets Stranger Things. Very easy, very summarized. It gets the portals going, it gets the superpowers going. I also start shouting out that if you the other tagline, thank you, Richard, is do you like superpowers? Shoot, one more time. Do you like superpowers, monsters, and time travel? Even though time travel isn't. See, this is why it's really hard to market my book because there is time travel in it, but it's basically just a medium for people to go experience other things. It's not wibbly wobbly time travel, if that makes any sense. My characters go to a place and they come back, and yeah. The person who wants to be a speaker. I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, Eddie. Yeah, sorry. So we'll yes, I did sell some early copies of Saving the Lost. I'm going to go through all the details, but I think you're referring to the guy with a girlfriend who came by, bought the first two books, and then came back the next day and bought the third. That's what you're talking about. I will get into it. Yes, time travel elements. Time travel is the medium. It's all about going into the void. There's parallel dimensions. They go to a specific point in the past, but that is yes, thank you. Person from Library of Congress. Yes. That is also a great story that I should share. Although I think they were more interested in you than me, but that is beside the point. So, overall success, failure. How many books did I sell? More or less than I expected. Well, in terms of money, which is ultimately what everything comes down to, I did not make back the cost of the table. And honestly, that's a conservative estimate because there was still food, parking, and other incidentals. I live close enough that I didn't need to get a hotel. So even from a conservative standpoint, I did not. This was technically a failure, although selling any books was fantastic. The table itself, I think, was $385 plus 2 days of parking because I didn't need to use my car the first day, which is actually really cool because my wife is awesome. And yeah, so even before factoring in food, parking, all that other stuff, I did not make back my table. However, on Friday when I started loading everything up, I have two heavy boxes, and I had to go all the way down, go all the way down another flight of stairs, go into the hall, put the box down, go back up to the car, do the whole process all over again. On Sunday when I was cleaning up, I took the two boxes, carried them all one go. So I sold enough that I was able to physically move my boxes out in one load. Now I did have to stop a few times because those two boxes are pretty heavy with all things considered. But yes, also putting my name out there is great. And yeah, the conversations I had and the interest that a couple of people had with my books was really, really invigorating. And I have some wonderful specific examples that I will get to in a second. There were a few people that I talked to who said they were interested and said they come back. I feel like that's kind of the metaphor that I can think of is it's like a middle school dance where you say, "Hey, save a dance for me," at such and such thing. And I feel like that's kind of a good sentiment, but it's ultimately an empty gesture, if not kind of pathetic. Anyways, where if somebody says, "Hey, yeah, this looks interesting, I'll come back for it," I just think, yeah, sure, they're either just being nice or they just went into the conversation or whatever. But a couple of people actually did come back, which I found to just be thrilling. There were a couple of people who I had great conversations with, and it was just fun shooting the shit with them. And then like, yeah, we're going off this talk, this, that, and the other, but we'll be back. And so I just kind of, I don't want to say wrote them off, but I wrote off the potential for a sale. And then to just have them come back was really, really great because it's, at the end of the day when I'm starting to think about cleaning up and everything, and then they just come back and they're like, yeah, by the way, we want to get your book. And that was just a wonderful way to bring a smile on my face. So, yeah. One person coming back made me, yeah. I was briefly referencing this earlier. There was one person who we had a wonderful conversation, and he came back at the end of the day, bought books 1 and 2, and then came back the next day with his girlfriend and bought book 3. So let me see if I can summarize my suggestions and tips for how to sell well. Because hands down, one of the greatest things that you can do to sell your books is to give away more than just your books. For me, my wonderful wife made perfumes, they fragrances for different scenes and characters within the story, and that instantly brought people over. So they saw these little perfume bottles, and then they started asking me questions about the book, about the perfume. They want to try the perfume, whether or not they enjoyed it, whether or not they bought the book. They still, we struck up a conversation. That's what it's really all about. So yes, what's that smell? They're actually good smells, although I was surprised that one of them sold. So there's regular smells. There's these 2 different smells that are forest. There's some for the characters. There's this one that's for Tracy, who's a very outgoing, outspoken character. She's one of the strong personalities within my story, and her fragrance is something sweet. And then there was the void, which is kind of ozonic and ethereal. And everyone who tried that smell, I tried to get them to describe it, and they really couldn't, other than saying it's otherworldly. And that somebody of the few sales of fragrances that I made, one of them was for the void, which was surprising. Yes, it's not designed to be wearable, but whatever. And in addition to having something unique at your table, whether that is, I don't know, maybe a chessboard where you maybe set it up to checkmate in 3 moves, and if they are able to do it, they get $1 off the book or something along those lines. Or I saw somebody with a really cool 3D printed tower, and you drop a dice in, and depending on what it lands on, you get either a sticker or something along those lines. I also had stickers and bookmarks to give away, but something to just kind of attract people to the booth. So whether that was the fragrances, the bookmarks, maybe of the people who took the bookmarks who seem somewhat interested in the story, they'll come back months later and say, yeah, I'll check out this book on Kindle. I'll find it there, and we'll get it that way. There are also plenty of people who didn't want physical copies, and so they may or may not buy a Kindle ebook version of my book. I don't know. But yeah, so in terms of how to sell, 1, be outgoing, which obviously I fail at. But 2, have something interesting or freebies at your table so that way you can attract people there in ways other than just shouting, buy my book at them. Did I sign any merch? I signed plenty of my merch. I signed the bookmarks. I signed the books themselves. I have a couple of taglines I use on the inside of the cover, like enjoy getting lost in the void or something along those lines. And yeah, a lot of people wanted me to sign it. Crocheted animals would be great draw too. Yes. So if anybody can crochet a scary polar bear, go for it. Life size cutout of me. That is an interesting take. It will probably be doing some annoying face like that, which would scare people more than entice them to come over. Do I use QR codes at all? Yes. I have a QR code for my YouTube channel that's out there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get double-sided bookmarks, or maybe just one-sided on the bottom. Either way, my bookmarks have my book picture on them, but I'm also going to get a QR code for my author page on Amazon with the next batch of bookmarks they make. The guy next to me had a wonderful thing where everybody asked him for a card or something so that they can look him up later. And he had his author image with the book going along with it and a QR code to his author page. So that's what I'm going to do during the next time around. I think I have a note to start designing that this week, and I should get those out in time for, if not the Kensington Row Bookshop, then definitely by Balticon, which is over Memorial Day weekend. Cool. So I talked about the excited group of excited people. There was also somebody from Balticon who I remembered me. He picked up books 1 and 2, and he was excited to see that book 3 was out. So he picked up an early edition of book 3, which is really cool. And now to the Library of Congress story. So a woman came over. She was actually really cool. She was dressed up as Sigourney Weaver from Galaxy Quest. So she was wearing the jumper and she had like the little Galaxy Quest logo. So it was really cool to see that. Saw a lot of really interesting cosplays. There's, a lot of standards. There were a bunch of avatars, Avatar: The Last Airbender, different costumes for there. I also saw an Anubis from Ronin Warriors, which is a very deep cut. Really cool to see. Now, let me think. So, Library of Congress, Galaxy Quest. I did say jumper. Yes. I don't know how else to describe it. It's basically like a onesie. Not like a jacket. It's like an American jumper. So sorry, Andy. I think it's a slightly different terminology because UK jumper is basically just a jacket, right? And this is more like a tracksuit onesie thing. Anyways, where was Library of Congress. So she came over because she saw the perfumes, and then Adriana started talking about how she made them and the process that went into making the different smells, and that there were 26 different types of smells that she made, and of those only 6 of them actually worked. So we started all talking, and Adriana and I have different views on how the conversation went. She thought that the woman who worked at the Library of Congress was more interested in having me come in and talk about what it's like to self-publish, but I'm almost positive that she was more interested in Adriana coming in to talk about making perfumes as a hobby and what to just how to go about that, how to learn a new skill and then teach yourself to improve. So we'll see. I gave her my contact information, so we'll see if anything comes of that. Oh, also, speaking about following up and emails, I don't have any answers for paying taxes due to AwesomeCon and having the DC be registered with the DC Authority. So I will be. She's the Library of Congress sci-fi speaker. Yes, I know that, but she was still talking about hobbies, and it seemed like she was much more interested in you and the perfumes than in my science fiction story. So we'll see. But yes, I did say taxes, and I will do a follow-up video once I think I'm going to have to re-energize after this past weekend. But I have everything documented for how many sales I made, and I'll go through the process of paying the taxes for all that. Once that's done, I will discuss that whole process here. Sweater. Then no. UK jumper is a sweater, so no, she wasn't wearing a sweater. She was wearing a tracksuit. I'm not going to prison. I pay my taxes. And yes, I have 3 different spreadsheets, one for each day, broken down by book, by type of product, whether it was a book, a magnet, or perfume, and then the specific book, magnet, or perfume. Jumpsuit. Thank you. It's a jumpsuit, not a jumper. Yes, taxes are the worst. We're okay. So let me think here. I talked about the woman from Library of Congress. I talked about the couple, and then I talked about the guy from Balticon. Okay, yeah. So this was a great rundown of people from Balticon. I was actually sitting next to somebody who I recognized from Balticon who had a table in the same room as I did. And so I got his book this time. I think I just talked to him. I don't remember why I didn't get his book at Balticon. He might have still been writing it. He might have only had a limited number of copies. Either way, I bought it now, and we actually did a swap. And yeah, so let me finish talking about this, and then I'll share the books that I got. And yeah, so Adriana was talking about how she helped me upsell for book 3 because the guy who I met at Balticon was really excited for books 1 and 2, and he was asking me, he was about to head back to his own booth, and Adriana was like, "By the way, book 3 is out, and here you can pick it up." So another tip is to have a partner, a friend, a wife, a girlfriend, somebody sitting next to you who can talk up your book. I've seen a couple of instances where they act as a plant on the other side of the table to be like, "By the way, this book is awesome and you should pick it up." But that always feels a little forced. I was talking with my neighbor, my booth neighbor, about that idea, and we both agreed that, yeah, it feels too forced to have somebody say that. But having somebody there who can pick up your slack whenever you have a lull in the conversation or can't think of anything to say, and you can bounce ideas off of each other, it is just really, it makes it more of a conversation than you trying to talk to one person, or if you forget what you're trying to say and the where your ideas are going just kind of dies like it is right now. Yeah, it helps to have somebody else. And I noticed that on both sides because we all had, I mean, sorry, each of us wrote a book. And then at some point throughout the conference, there were our friends, coworkers, my wife, who were sitting there with us and trying to help sell our books. And I definitely noticed that I was able to sell more with her there than with her not. Obviously, I noticed the same with the people next to me. I feel like the people next to me was friends, and then over on the other side, it was friends slash coworkers. And so I saw that throughout the entire area that we were in, where whenever there were multiple people at the booth, they would have a free flowing conversation going. And I feel like more books are being sold. So if you can, grab a friend, grab somebody to help you sell your books. That being said, I was very interested in what sells because there were these two people who came up and they were reading about these fragrances, and we and one of the fragrances, it says, this remind it was, I forget exactly what the line is, but on there, so it says what's in the fragrance, it says how it relates to the story, and then there's, I think, a little excerpt from the book on the cue cards, on the laminated cards for each of the fragrances. And on one of them, it says something about Maryland. So the woman is like, "Oh, I'm from Maryland. This is awesome because there's almost no stories about Maryland," which is a problem I faced when I started writing this because that's kind of the story that I want to tell. They're like, "Oh, well, it always has to do with either Baltimore or especially Washington D.C., and it's usually some kind of crime thriller if it takes place in DC." And I'm like, I know that's the worst. And in fact, this story is all about Maryland. And that got her really interested. And then I was like, well, if you like that, book 2 takes place at the Columbia Mall. And she's like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm definitely picking up both these books. So she was really excited to have the setting be something that she's familiar with. And that's kind of, I mean, it's not why I wrote the book, why I wrote the book and why I chose that area is because it's what I know very, very well. But now I have an idea about how to try and advertise my book. It's Maryland focused when they aren't traveling through time or to other dimensions. And in that way, it is somewhat unique. And yes, that is definitely niche. My book is, for lack of a better word, I mean, that's a great way to describe my books. But once you start reading them, things sort of flow very naturally. So, yes, there is time travel in there, but it's not really like Doctor Who time travel or Douglas Adams time travel. I feel like there's time travel in um, somewhere in Hitchhiker's Guide. Anyways, what about Maryland cookies? Oh, yeah, there are Maryland cookies that are called burgers. They're basically just not sourdough, but they're like a sugar cookie with a brownie on top. And I know they aren't specific to Maryland, but that's what I always think of with Maryland because the company, I think, was originally based out of Baltimore. Yes, burger cookies. Thank you. That's what I said. It's like butter cookie on bottom and a fudge brownie on top. And they are delicious and extremely unhealthy. So that was, yeah. So talking about how my story takes place in Maryland sold my books. They are not like a black and white cookie. That is erroneous on all counts. Black and white is, oh, I get, okay, fine. They're similar, but that's, the black and white is frosty on top, whereas a burger cookie is just a brownie that's just dropped on there. Anyways, I heard I heard her laughing through the floor, which is always great. Yes, everybody kind of had their own unique thing that they were doing. I noticed that one person behind me had kind of an old castle, old timey castle feel to it. There were treasure chests. There was somebody across the way that was doing a raffle for $1 off, $1 off their merchandise. So you have raffles, you have a full on background of a castle atmosphere for a fantasy story. Everybody kind of has their own gimmick that they go along with, which means that I kind of need to I gotta stop saying kind of, which means that I need to step up my game for how my works are displayed. I also use two big, well, semi big. They're about 2 feet wide by 1 feet tall. They're posters of the first and second book without any words on them, so that way it shows off the artwork, which did draw in some eyes and start some conversations. So I try and, as dumb as it sounds, I try and let my book covers sell my book along with the fragrances, along with the bookmarks. So I have kind of a multi-pronged approach. And whether that overwhelms people, I don't honestly know. I also had a tablet set up with the teaser trailers for the first and second books, which was running on loop. Every 90 seconds, it goes to the next video and then loops back to the first. So that is really helpful for catching people's eyes. Yes, as Bethany mentioned. And then lastly, there were a couple of very interesting conversations where it was questionably high school students with their parents there. And my books are, I would describe them as new adult. So I felt a little bit guilty selling them the books, but I explicitly said what was in the stories. I said there's mild cursing, there's, underage drinking, there's some mature scenarios, nothing sexual, but there are still mature scenarios. There's mild violence, though most of it happens to non-human characters, and then there's some, sewing up and stitching of wounds. And the parents were there, so we had the conversation, and they still want to buy the book, so it works out. And I know for a fact that one of my friends gave my books to their kids. Their kids were, I feel like, 10 and 8 at the time. Probably 10. We'll say 10. And they didn't have a problem with anything that was in it. So, the parents ultimately had the final say. So as much as I didn't necessarily think my book would find the mark with said audience, I'm happy to be wrong. I definitely read a lot of books that I probably shouldn't have when I was a kid. And my parents just didn't really care so long as I was reading. So definitely had some mature themes that I was exposed to as arguably a child. So not even arguably, as a child, I was exposed to a lot of mature themes through the books I was reading. Yes. New adult might even be a little bit older than 18. I've seen some sexual content in new adult books. So I would say maybe 15. I wouldn't even say 15. I would say like 16 to 21 is probably new adult. Oh, thank you. Well, there are, I do it by PG-13 rules. So there's one F-bomb per book. There's some pretty graphic violence at times, but again, it's mostly to non-human characters. And by book 3, there's some very, very dark themes that were hinted at in the first 2 books that outright get stated in book 3. Yeah, I never read Animal Farm, but I don't know. And so yeah, so that's everything I want to say. I gave some advice for how to work in your own booths. Let me think if there was anything that really caught my eyes. It's all about display. So there's actually a really cool, well, I can't really describe it, but I have my own little, these things. Plastic displays for the books where I would set them up here. And so they would be kind of angled towards an audience of people walking by. But there was one woman, I don't really know how to describe it. The person right next to me, she found these on Etsy. They're by a guy who custom makes them. It's basically like a metal, not even clamp, but like a metal base with a piece up here. So the book rests up here, and then underneath you have your own book side that'll be sideways, so it's easy to grab and pull out. So it combines both stacking your books vertically with the angled way of viewing it. So it's really cool. I plan on getting that. And that's everything I can think of. I think the hardest part with being at a con is that any gimmick you have, somebody else will most likely have it. So there's a lot of very pretty displays that I saw, which, you go a couple of rows over and you'll see something similar. You can have boom boxes, you can have giveaways, you can have all types of things, but I don't know. Honestly, I feel like no matter what, it's going to be kind of a crapshoot where I don't honestly know what works. I'm going to keep having my perfume displays out in front and center to try and attract people over because I feel like that works best just as a conversation starter. Would I do a vendor gig again? Absolutely. Even though I didn't make back my money here, I still had fun. Tickets, I think, are $100 for all 3 days. So technically, well, when my wife was at the station, when my wife was behind the table, we would alternate out, and so I got to experience the con a little bit. Obviously, I didn't get to experience the con a whole lot because I was a vendor, but yeah, I genuinely think even though I lost money being here, that getting my name out there, getting just having those conversations, let's get a little personal. On Friday, I was feeling a little bit down the dumps because I started off the day with a run and I ended up picking up human waste, which is always a fun experience. So I was kind of feeling down on the whole human race at that point. And sure enough, Friday, go to AwesomeCon. I get set up, and there's a guy from Balticon who was there. And then there's the woman right next to me. It was a lot of fun to talk to. And we were just swapping stories before the con even started. And then people came up and they actually started talking to me, and they were interested in the book that I had written, which, sure, I didn't sell 100 copies. I didn't even sell 40. I didn't even sell 20. But the number that I did sell, those are new readers who I wouldn't have had otherwise. So yes, I genuinely think that as long as I'm able to sell, a handful of books, let's say 5, as long as I can sell 5 books, I would absolutely say that going to AwesomeCon is worth it. And AwesomeCon is by far the most expensive con that I'm going to. I think it's about twice as expensive as Balticon. So, yeah, I I greatly think that anybody who can spare the investment, because I would go into it assuming that you're going to not make your money back, but I would greatly advise everybody to take part in as being a vendor. It's a great way to showcase what your book is, to practice over and over again repeatedly, and to see different ways of selling your book, to have somebody next to you giving their own take on what you've written, and having somebody who has read books 1 and 2 come back and say, this is what I liked about it, this is, this is what your book is to me. And all of that kind of goes, oh, yep, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can just go with shit. I'll say it. I cleaned up poop on my run, and I have a little baggie in the waistband that carries my water that I already used because I was cleaning up after somebody who didn't clean up after their dog. Basically, I clean up my neighborhood. If I see something gratuitous when I'm on my run, I actually have a turnaround point where I know that there is going to be a trail of crappy beer. So I pick up beer cans and then just toss them in the dumpster or when I come back. Um, but yeah, I really don't like being on the bridge, which is another turnaround point, and just seeing a pile of human poop. So luckily there was a giant thing of plastic on that bridge. So I took it. I used the plastic to make sure I didn't touch anything, and then just bundle it up and threw it out in waste bin. So that's always fun. But yeah, so I start off Friday kind of in the dumps, literally, and being at AwesomeCon completely reinvigorated me. and helped rekindle my faith in humanity. So, that's always a plus. Yeah. Like I said, if you can, and there were people with these elaborate displays and everything, I would recommend not starting off that way. Maybe start off something smaller than Awesome Con and slowly building that up over time. So, you know, book one, work on getting a good way to display your book, whether that's a piece of plastic, whatever it may be. Then maybe the next time you go through and put out a tablecloth with your name on it, I might include writing to write, a couple of your books, whatever. Then later on, get like a huge one of those fold out displays that sort of rolls. It's almost like a projector screen, but it includes, your name, the books you've written, maybe a quote, maybe the fact that you have a 5-star review, and maybe a quote from that review. I've seen a whole bunch of things like that around there when I was walking the various lanes at AwesomeCon, and maybe get a kind of castle pattern background. So something that's looks like mortar and stone lined up together with your fantasy series cover all over it. Whatever you do, don't do more than you were capable of giving. That's the best advice I can do. So, you're already going into Awesome Con. Don't spend another $1,000 on all these crazy banners and everything, because that is honestly what's holding me back from getting one of those big rolling out displays that I can put behind me, is that I don't know what to put on it. And I had this conversation with my wife. We were trying to discuss what we would do with it. And I honestly don't know, because I feel like if I put my name on it, my face, my writing to write brand, that would get boring very quickly, and it doesn't really show you or show somebody walking by about my book. Then if I do my books, well, I'm going to be writing more books. So it feels like that would be, unless I knew I'm doing a lot of cons over a given year, I feel like that would be just a point in time which no longer exists 2 years later. So it would be a lot of upfront investment for something without much returns, or something that would get outdated very quickly. And that is my advice for AwesomeCon. So let me start going into all of the lovely, lovely things I got. Let me see here. Okay. So I'll start off with the people who were next to me first and foremost. So we have The Society by Jonathan Soule, which is kind of like Mass Effect, where you have a intergalactic, I don't want to say federation. By the way, everything I know about these books was either told to me in a short 1-minute conversation. I haven't actually read the back yet, or something that I've overheard Jonathan or the other JR, the other person sitting next to me, I heard them giving their sales pitch over and over again, so it kind of stuck with me. So what I say right now might actually be wrong, because like I said, I haven't started reading this book yet. But this is kind of humanity deciding whether or not we want to join that intergalactic federation. And I think there's some kind of murder that goes on, and a lot of intrigue. Thank you. A lot of intrigue with it. Although that's the UK link, but that's cool. And so yeah, it's humanity is trying to be considered worthy of joining this intergalactic federation, but then they also want to decide whether or not they should. Because if Jurassic, no, don't be sorry, you're good, man. Because to quote from Jurassic Park, the scientists were so convinced whether or not they could, they never considered whether or not they should. Yes, there we go. That's the line. So Jonathan compared this story to Mass Effect, or he said at least that it inspired his work. So I will get a review going as soon as I finish it. It's a bit thick. It is 450 pages, so going to take me some time. But I got a holiday coming up soon, and I will read these books as I get a chance. Next up, we have on the other side of the booth, we have J.R. Pomerantz. Corporate torsos need not apply. Let's just say that whatever, I'll say it. We're more than 5 minutes into this video, so I can curse if I want to. And these aren't actually curses, but This book was described to me as something that's completely off the wall. It's basically a post-flood apocalypse. So I'm assuming that the seas rise and people are just trying to survive. She described it as completely bonkers. And the very first sentence on the back, she only wanted to find a testicle bra for her boss, but when she's dragged into an international conspiracy, will she get to clock out at 5? I don't know. Yes. Oh boy, we'll put that one up on screen. So we heard multiple pitches from different books by that author, and my wife and I were trying to decide which one of our books we wanted to get. As soon as I read that line out loud, my wife was like, "Get that book! Get that book!" Richard, I don't honestly know. I have some assumptions, but my assumptions is that it is kind of like boxer briefs where they are snug. I don't know. Yeah, see, support briefs. That's what I'm assuming it is. All right. We also have E.J. Wenstrom, and this is Mud. It's honestly, Eloise, this is kind of similar to your book. It's Greek influenced, and you have I mean, it's completely different because I don't think it's ancient Greece. This I think is like modern Greece with gods in it. And so you have a person who is trapped. I honestly don't know anything about this. The whole reason why I got this book is because E.J. Wenstrom is the woman who told me at BaltCon that there was an author's lane at AwesomeCon. So the entire reason why I was at AwesomeCon this year is because of this author. So I really want to get something about her book. She was really excited about this. This is a great starting point. It's a great jumping on point. So that is why I picked this up. And you know what? I'll just read it. So, trapped by his maker's command to protect a mysterious box, Adam is forced to kill anyone who tries to steal it. When a young boy chances upon Adam's temple, he resists temptation, intriguing the golem. As the boy and his sister convince Adam to leave the refuge of his temple, the group lands in a web of trouble. So yeah, I thought that she said that these were ancient god inspires, but I don't see anything on the back about ancient gods. So, Eloise, I'm sorry I might have been wrong. I will let you all know as soon as I finish reading this. And yeah, even though she is the reason that I was at AwesomeCon this year as a vendor, I didn't tell her that. I don't know. I just got up, got her book, didn't need to make a whole big deal about it. And then lastly, we have Johnny Dollar, which is a comic book that I picked up. It is right up my alley this is based on, oh, he gave me the whole story. It's based on an old serial that was on the radio, but essentially it's somebody with a limitless card and he is fighting cybercrime. So I don't know anything about this, but my dinner is ready, so I'm about to head out and I will let you all know about these various stories when I read them. But yeah, it's somebody the author is he works in ransomware, so he's got a lot of tech experience, and this is influenced by his real world experience. So you have somebody with a limitless bank account, I think, and he goes around solving cyber crimes. So that's everything I picked up. And yeah, I believe the Kickstarter is over, but well, it's quesadilla time. So I will see you all next week. I don't know what I'm talking about next week. I have it lined up, but off the top of my head, I don't remember it. AwesomeCon was awesome. Good luck if you decide to be a vendor at any con, whatever it is. I will absolutely try to be at AwesomeCon next year again as a vendor. So if you have an interest in pop culture, comic books, nerdy things, self-published authors, come out to DC, have fun, and we can meet in person. I'll also be at BaltCon, but that's a little bit smaller conference and focused in the Baltimore area. And then I will be at Kensington Row Bookshop, which is, as the name implies, a bookshop's local event. So yeah, I will see you all next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. And thank you for being here, everyone. This was such a great conversation. Just like at the conference, it feels much better to have people going back and forth than just sit here staring at a camera and saying what I want to say. So thank you for being here on the stream, and I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful evening. Bye.